What are you so scared of?
What am I so scared of?
Fear is an unusual part of life, and it manifests itself in all sorts of different ways. The fear can be something small and in the moment, or something deeper and more extensive. Whether the threat is real or imaginary, fear triggers a defensive response, causing the person either to become physically aggressive or to flee the scene to retreat to safety. Gus Van Sant's Good Will Hunting is a subtle examination in fear and how, if you let it, it can constrain your potential and even push you away from what you really want. Let's take a look at how Will Hunting has his fears confronted and relieved by Sean Maguire over the course of just 8 face-to-face interactions, and how Sean breaks through Will's defense mechanisms to change him for the better. The very opening shot tells us a lot about Will. He lives alone in a single dark room. The blinds are pulled, shielding him from the outside world as he indulges in what he secretly loves: reading. This immediately tells us that Will is afraid to be seen for who he really is. Will was moved around a lot as a kid, between foster homes and juvenile detention centers. He now lives a small life built on routine. He gets picked up by his best friend Chuck every morning. They hang out, drive around, drink beer, and get in fights. As things stand, his future is just this. It's the life he knows, and therefore what is perceived to be safe. But Will has a secret curiosity about what else is out there for him. He hides his motivations from even himself, choosing to be a night janitor at Harvard. This is his way of subconsciously scoping the place out for a while, almost pretending he was accepted there by walking the halls at night and soaking up the atmosphere. Then he sees a mathematical theorem left on the chalkboard for the students who were accepted to solve. Only a handful of people in the world could solve this theorem, and as it turns out, Will is one of them. Almost like a secret love affair, Will's passion for mathematics can only be revealed late at night, while no one else is around, as Will has 2 contradictory fears driving him: the fear of being stuck here forever and never unlocking his potential, and the fear of unlocking his potential and failing. This attitude is the polar opposite to the students and professors at Harvard who fear being perceived as not smart enough. This is shown when Professor Lambeau or obnoxious students like Clark are always flexing their intellect to try to attract women.
I was just hoping you might give me some insight into the evolution of the market economy in the southern colonies.
This clashes with Will's worldview, as life has conditioned him to hide his abilities, causing him to resent those who posture their intellect in public. So Will keeps his identity a secret, letting the work speak for itself at a safe distance. The Harvard community are puzzled, as in their worlds, there is a clear incentive to come forward and receive praise, so the mystery of the secret genius grows. When Lambeau discovers Will writing on the chalkboard and confronts him, Will runs away, not wanting to be seen, as he is scared of being perceived to want more, as that betrays the life he has built with his loyal friends. But he also holds a resentment of the education world, fearing that he won't be accepted in it. This constant push-pull feeling inside of him, lying to himself about what he really wants. After being arrested for assault, Will is sentenced to jail time, and Professor Lambeau steps in, the court allowing Will to be released under his supervision under 2 requirements: that he solves mathematical equations with him, and that he also attends therapy. Will rejects the idea of therapy, but now has a safe excuse to truly test his potential. Will always wants an out, an excuse in case he fails, so being forced into it by the courts relieves some of his personal responsibility. But to Lambeau's disappointment, Will refuses to take therapy seriously. Having been abandoned by his parents and abused in foster care homes, Will has an inherent distrust of authority figures, and instead uses these sessions as a chance to outsmart the psychologists to prove they don't deserve his trust.
Look into my eyes.
Get out, Will.
I don't need therapy.
Enter Sean, the last option, who from his very first scene sums up what he is all about.
Trust.
He also grew up in Southie and was Lambeau's former college roommate. Session 1.
It's a poker game with this kid. Don't let him know what you got.
Just like the others, Will's defense starts with offense. He tests Sean, inspecting the books in his office, trying to read him as a man. He views these books as mere props, as if Sean is just another posturing intellectual, so challenges him on that front. But there are small moments that Will can't win on. First, he sees a photo of Sean serving in Vietnam, and secondly, asks him how much he benches. Realizing Sean benches more than him, Will retreats and shifts topic, until he finds Sean's weakness. He makes a reading off a painting and goes straight for the jugular, unaware that Sean's wife is dead.
Why'd she leave you? Was she, banging some other guy?
Sean snaps and gets physical with him, speaking a language Will understands. He freezes with fear. Will may have won by getting under his skin, but was also the first to retreat. After the first session, Will meets Skylar for a date, and it goes really well. They make each other happy, and there is potential for a meaningful relationship if Will is open to the idea of having one. Session 2. After Will's reckless comments temporarily turned Sean's life upside down, he brings Will out into the real world instead of staying in his office, so he has nothing to deflect to. By not running away like the other therapists who had their ego hurt, Sean is proving his dedication to Will. But he proceeds to break Will's ego down by stripping his opinions of their power, reminding him of everything he doesn't know.
You've never been out of Boston. I bet you can't tell me you've never been near one. But you can't tell me what it feels like, but you've never looked at a woman and been totally vulnerable. You don't know about real loss.
He exposes Will as a fraud who just regurgitates what he has read out of a book, making him no better than Clark from the Harvard bar. But while belittling Will, Sean reveals parts of his own life experience. This leaves Will speechless and sets an example for him that vulnerability isn't a weakness. After the second session, Will is shaken. He's too scared to call Skylar, out of a fear that she won't accept him, even choosing to lie to his friends about it. So Will is now more aware that he's not as cool or experienced as he used to think he was. This defensive shield that he's developed is holding him back. Session 3. Given it is court-mandated therapy, Will could always give himself an out, as he's forced to be there. But by refusing to initiate any conversation and just wasting the session in silence, Sean proves Will doesn't have to talk to him unless he wants to, meaning Will has to actively choose to engage in therapy. This way, there is nowhere to hide. After the third session of pure silence, Lambeau helps Will to explore his unemotional, purely intellectual path. He views Will as his protege, which validates a lot of Will's fears of not being accepted. Session 4. Will finally breaks his silence by deflecting to a joke set on a plane.
You ever been on a plane?
Sean asks him if he's ever been on a plane, reminding Will of their new dynamic, that Sean is an authority figure due to his real-life experience. Feeling insecure, Will tries to boast about his sex life and how things are going with Skylar, but expresses uncertainty moving forward, as she is perfect in his imagination right now, and if he sees her again, she may disappoint him. This is Will's way of framing the situation as within his control, but Sean turns it around on him, that maybe what Will really fears is that he's the imperfect one, and that he may not qualify for her.
But I think that's a super philosophy, Will. That way you can go through your entire life without ever having to really know anybody.
As Will reflects, Sean launches into a story about how his wife used to fart in bed. Will is shocked by the honesty, and they share a deep laugh about it. This is how Sean makes Will's biggest fear, real intimacy, sound appealing, that flaws and imperfections are not deal breakers, but the best part. Will then turns it around on Sean, asking him if he intends to remarry, and when Sean says no, Will uses his own quote against him.
Well, I think that's a super philosophy, Sean. I mean, that way you could actually go through the rest of your life without ever really knowing anybody.
This shows that Will is now imitating Sean the same way that he learns from books. After the 4th session, Will sneaks into Skylar's dorm. Before knocking on her door, he steals an intimate moment by just listening to her sing. It's not perfect, but he still likes it, now putting Sean's lessons into action. He takes her out, and she asks about his upbringing. Will is defensive, but does answer her, revealing he has 12 brothers, but doesn't explain the full truth as to why, that he's an orphan, as she hasn't earned that yet, and he still fears the truth could expose him too much and that she'll abandon him. Session 5. Will politely asks Sean if he regrets loving his wife as he ended up losing her. This highlights Will's fear of abandonment, as he is already looking for a way out with Skylar, hoping that he can justify it to himself that the relationship wouldn't be worth the pain. But Sean tells the story of how he met his wife, that he had a ticket to the World Series, the biggest game in Red Sox history, but that he skipped the game because he went to pursue her instead.
I just slid my ticket across the table and I said, "Sorry guys, I gotta see about a girl."
I gotta go see about a girl?
Sean reassures Will that he has no regrets about his decisions in life, as failure isn't about losing, it's about not even risking trying. In this conversation, the baseball game becomes a metaphor for life, that Sean doesn't regret getting to be a spectator at the game because instead he took the risk of being a player on the field by pursuing his wife, and that is how to live with no regrets. After the 5th session, Will is more and more open to being intimate with Skylar. He chooses to let her into his world a little more by introducing her to his friends. It's going so well that she invites Will to move to California with her, as she has to move there for school. But this is too much too soon for Will, scared that if he takes that big a risk, it could fail. He starts to sabotage the relationship to protect himself from being out of control, expressing fears that maybe she'll realize that he's not what he appears and abandon him. Skylar triggers him by asking, "What are you so scared of?" Will spirals, deflecting blame anywhere he can, calling her privileged and out of touch, or maybe just using him. She tries to reassure him, but Will isn't ready to risk being loved, finally revealing that he's an orphan, not as a way to let her in, but as a way of pushing her away.
Don't you fucking bullshit me!
I love you.
Continuing to sabotage himself, Will loses interest in his work too, and when Lambeau confesses to resenting Will for dwarfing the accomplishments he centered his identity around, this confirms Will's fearful suspicion that everyone is just using him, so he starts lashing out in job interviews. Session 6. Realizing Will is in full fear and defensive mode, Sean tries to cut through Will's force field with an incisive question.
You feel like you're alone, Will?
What?
This is to try to make Will realize that he pushes people away to not feel tested, as when you are tested, you might lose. He asks Will what he wants, and Will deflects to the safety of what he knows, giving unserious answers. Sean decides to kick Will out to not reward this behavior, as they had made such progress already. The reason Will can't answer what job he wants is that he doesn't want any of them. He wants to go to California with Skylar, but he's too scared to admit it, making every other path he could pick a failure by default, as he is betraying himself. After session 6, Will calls Skylar to wish her well on her trip. She reinforces that she loves Will, but given he has had so many disappointments, with Lambeau and Sean recently, he just hangs up. Although he can't express what he wants with words, his actions tell another story, and he sits to watch her plane leave. The opportunity flying away above him symbolizing his fear physically tying him to the ground. When Chuck asks Will about why things didn't work out with Skylar, he leaves out critical details from the story, like that she didn't actually abandon him, that he just chose not to follow her. Seeking out comfort in his decision to stay, Will expresses that he looks forward to growing old around here with Chuck. But Chuck shuts down that possibility, revealing that he would resent Will more for staying, not for leaving. This teaches Will that people that love you may push you away because they want the best for you. You don't always have to earn their love through sacrifice. Session 7. In a true head versus heart debate, Will walks in on Lambeau arguing with Sean over his future, both symbolizing the types of man Will could become. Hearing Sean defend him and echo the same concerns about Lambeau's proposed path for him makes Will feel understood. After Lambeau leaves, Sean reveals Will's file, which contains intimate details of past abuse. He creates a safe space to discuss what happened by revealing his own abusive history. Sean reassures Will over and over again that all of these traumatizing things that happened to him are not his fault.
It's not your fault. It's not your fault.
Because for someone as smart as Will, who can solve the world's most complex theorems, he has always believed he was a failure for not finding a way out of that situation. He didn't have the answer, and he couldn't control anything, making it harder for him to trust others as well as his own decisions. Although there is a final flash of defense, Will accepts Sean's embrace and finally rids himself of the responsibility of his childhood. After the 7th session, Will ends up accepting a local job offer. Session 8. In their final official session, Will finds it difficult to let go of Sean, who has now become the first positive father figure in his life. Given that Sean is perceived to be a failure by Lambeau and has lost more than most people have ever even had, he is an ideal example for Will to aspire to, as he demonstrates that perceived failure and loss is nothing to fear. Sean secures trust in this father figure position by proving he's reliable. He gives Will his phone number and states that he can call anytime. But Sean has also seen parts of himself in Will, as he's been avoiding taking risks since he lost his wife. He chooses to open himself up to the world again by traveling more and seeing what his luck brings. After his final session, Will's friends give him a life-changing birthday gift, a car. It may not look like much, but it symbolizes so much more. Free will. He isn't limited by public transport or rides from friends. He can go anywhere, and it's as if they will always be with him. Now feeling secure, Will decides to leave all of this behind, emulating Sean abandoning the baseball game for what he knew was right for him, because Will now knows what type of man he wants to become. And that's how, with patience and goodwill, Sean changes Will hunting for the better over the course of 8 sessions. From the beginning of the story, Will has always felt trapped in foster care homes, in detention centers, in Southie, even under Lambeau's supervision and guidance. He's always been moved around like a pawn on a chessboard. But Sean unlocked Will's ability to choose what he wants for himself. So he follows his heart and drives to California to risk it all with Skylar. And while the opening shot was Will stuck in a small dark room with the blinds shut, reading about other people's experiences as a prisoner of fear, the final shot is him driving down an open road, truly living with unlimited possibility. Well, you've made it this far, so you might as well like, comment and subscribe to help get this channel to the next level.